Well, welcome to What's Up Buttercup, the podcast that looks at the broad green stripe in the rainbow flag. A place, a space, to talk queer nature, and our space as LGBT plus people in it. I've always struggled to extract myself from the very comfortable bubble of nature and gardening and get my voice and my messages about nature heard by anyone other than those people who are already interested. Today, I'm going to be talking to someone that I've come to admire a lot for his ability to use his platform to access people from outside of the nature and gardening bubble. He uses a set of unique and very special talents to do that. His name is John McCallen, and he is a gardener, a naturalist, and a serious peddler of plant porn. Hi, John. It's so nice to meet you. And first thing that we're going to say is that Nick, your husband, is in the background filming and doing stuff. It's really nice to have him around, although he's going to stay quiet through this, possibly, maybe. You are somebody that I admire.
Thank you.
A lot for the gentle way that you present nature and plants and gardening and what have you across all of your channels, for your sense of humour, which I really appreciate. It's quite a gentle sense of humour, isn't it? But it's yeah, I really like it. And you're someone that a lot of people love for a whole bunch of other reasons. And I really wanted to get you on this podcast because I think that what you do, the fact that you use a platform to engage people with gardening, with nature, with the natural world, with plants, and not just at a very kind of basic level, but actually sometimes in quite an in-depth level. I think that that's super special. It's quite an amazing talent, really. Many of the people that are listening to this, I know who you are. I follow you on social media, and we've chatted a bit in the background and stuff about a few bits and pieces, but there's a lot of people out there that would not know who you are. I am hoping to get some people listening to this podcast that aren't already followers of yours. So could you please tell me who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah. Well, I like to think in terms of my identity, being a gardener is actually very core to that, although it is not my profession exactly. So if I can go back a little bit to the start and tell you a little bit about how I became who I am, I think that will help explain where I am now. So I was very lucky to grow up first on a large ranch in the country and then on a larger property closer to a town. And I've always had the ability to experiment with plants in the space that I lived. So starting from when I was a really little kid, I was planting things and watching them grow and enjoying that experience. And so my whole life, I really loved being involved with plants and their life cycles. But as I got older, I wasn't sure how I could make that into a sustainable career.
I know that story.
I grew up in a little bit of like an unstable situation. It wasn't always bad, but it wasn't stable. And so I was very concerned by the time I was a teenager about how I was going to be okay, how I was going to take care of myself and take care of the rest of my family. And that was really top of mind. And so I identified a few things that I was really good at. I was good at sports, and I loved living things, not just plants, but plants was my gateway into that. And so I thought, okay, so what I need to do is get into a good university, and I can study biology because that's something that I'm sort of predisposed to. And hopefully I can just have a good career with that. That's about as far as I thought, because I was the first person in my family to go to university. So I did it. I got into Stanford University. I studied biology with a focus on ecology and evolution there. And by the end of my time there winding down, I realized, oh, it's not enough just to have a degree in science. That doesn't automatically mean that you make it. Because your choices, it's kind of like academia or business and or possibly medicine. And I got to the point at the end of my bachelor's where I had the realization that I had taken my 4 years of taking, and I needed to start giving back financially to my family, like immediately. I didn't have the confidence or the resources to say, no, I'm going to continue to grad school, or no, I'd like to, take on more debt and go to medical school, because there were pressing financial issues that I needed to resolve. And so I thought, okay, well, I got this degree. It's from prestigious school. Maybe I'll just go to work for a business. So I did. I went to work for a technology company for a number of years, but always keeping my passion for growing plants, gardening alive that whole time. But it was something that I did kind of as an emergency measure in a way, because I needed a stable job. I needed the support that provided.
It's almost the same story that you and I share.
Oh, really?
I left. I'm going to let you carry on in a minute, but I left school, didn't know what the hell I was going to do, wanted to do this thing. I actually didn't end up in university. I had to go straight into the job.
Yeah.
Because of the financial pressure that was there on me. Anyway, yeah. I will hold that thought and carry on.
Yeah. I think, there's a lot of people that say, oh, like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life and whatever. But in some ways, that idea is much more tenable if you come from a situation where you can do whatever you want. You don't have other people already depending on you, And so I think you and I probably both know that feeling where it's like, okay, well, sometimes it's not only about what you want in this moment.
Totally.
So that was a little bit of what happened there. So I worked for a technology company for many years, learned a lot, but it was never like my true passion or what I love. That's always been gardening and caring for plants. And so during that time, I did a lot of volunteering, like at the San Francisco Botanical Garden, or orchid societies that I was involved in, because I just wanted to participate in that world outside of where I was making my money. It was important to me. And I, like many people, went to a city to work because that's where the job was. So it's a different situation than where I grew up.
I did.
And when I was
exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I think so many people do. It's the story of urbanization over the last few decades of the 20th century. And I saw lots of people that had minimal connection to the natural world and just kind of plant blindness and the inability to differentiate or recognize different types of plants, or even conceive of all the different types of life cycles that plants might have. I encountered people who had this idea of plants as a monolithic category. And I was really surprised by that. And then I realized, oh, there's millions of people that don't have the personal experience or the connection that I was privileged to have growing up. And because it's so core to my experience of joy in the world, I want to try to give that to other people. So that's when I first started thinking about that, but I didn't know how, right? Because at this point, I didn't have much of a platform. And I'm a little bit of an introverted person. And so outside of the plant societies or the botanical garden where I was volunteering and trying to talk to people about plants and things like that, it was not scaling in the way that I hope that someday it could. So fast forward a few years, and I stopped working at, I moved around to a number of different technology companies, but eventually I stopped working in that field, and I moved full-time into producing online content, which was a little bit scary. At the time that I moved in, I had sort of developed reach and developed a platform before I fully went into it. But I mean, it's a very different world than being employed and having your health insurance, which is like so important in the United States, and getting your weekly paycheck be the same amount and everything like that. But I decided to move fully into being my own boss, because that's also the freedom to be who I want to be and do exactly what I want to do, and not be kind of curtailed by the corporate world was also important to me. So at that time, I thought like, all right, there's a few different types of content that I am creating. One, essentially, like I create adult entertainment, and that is what helps me reach initially a larger audience than I had before. But it was always important to me to have like multiple prongs to my presence, because while I do think that adult entertainment actually provides something very real and very meaningful to people and an important part of their lives, it's like definitely not the only thing that I wanted to share. And going back to meeting people who felt or who were, in my eyes, disconnected from plants specifically in the natural world, I thought, all right, great. Now I'm in the position where, millions of people each month see or interact with my presence online. So what do I want to show them besides what I'm doing to earn my money?
And that's exactly why I when I first started following you on Instagram, I was like, oh my goodness me, I didn't start following. I'm probably one of a small handful of people that didn't start following you because of the adult entertainment industry. But I started following you because there was a person there that was delivering content about nature, about plants, and that they were utilizing their presence online, which is, a huge presence, to be able to engage people that wouldn't otherwise be engaged. I've said it before to you. I just think that that's an absolutely fascinating thing to see.
Yeah. I'm going to paraphrase this quote. I'm not going to get it quite right, but something that has been like deeply meaningful to me is somebody once said something like, you can only protect what you love, and you can only love what you know. And so I saw that there were people out there for whom the natural world generally and plants specifically were kind of a complete unknown. And now is like a critical time for the protection of the natural world.
Oh, right? My goodness
so
me.
We need to get people, as the first step at least, we got to know what's out there so they can find something that they connect with and that they love. So then they can start thinking about what can we do to protect these things? Because without active care and love and intervention, a lot of things are struggling right now. And I think that's so important.
I left school. I went off to be a model because I didn't have much of another choice. I ended up in the hairdressing industry, makeup artist, etc., etc. This is kind of a route that when you're a gay man or a member of the LGBT plus community, they're routes that you get really strongly pushed down by that scene and that community, and it just felt like that was the right place for me to be in order to have the community that I needed. But it was never the right place for me. And that's what, that's kind of just a little bit of my story, but I'm not going to go into that. I'll do a whole podcast episode about my story at some other point in time. But working kind of when you stepped away from your love of nature, when you found, I don't know, when did you come out?
Not until I was an adult. So I also, I'm not necessarily, this might be surprising to hear, I'm not a very people-centered person.
Good.
To the extent that I even I didn't know myself quite well until I was an adult. Obviously, I knew what I enjoyed about the world around me, and I knew what I enjoyed doing. But I wasn't, like, for example, aware when I was growing up that I was really attracted to people of the same sex, for example. Um, and I didn't really like fully discover that until I was an adult. So I was spared that experience that a lot of LGBT people have of feeling like they're concealing something about themselves, or that they feel from their environment that they should be ashamed in some way of who they are. I was lucky to avoid that, but largely just because I wasn't introspective about my own self and like my desires in a deep way.
That's really nice to hear. Because actually, there's. I think what I'm trying to tease out of this is, you found yourself in an industry that wasn't necessarily the industry that you were wanting per se to be in. You probably love the work that you do, and that's amazing. I loved all of the time that I spent modeling and hairdressing and all of that
Mhm.
stuff. It was an amazing time in my life. But it was also a time in my life where I did an awful lot of soul searching. I had to keep attached to nature somehow. And you touched on the fact that you did some volunteering and what have you, but how did you how have you managed to keep that spark, that passion alive when you weren't working in anything to do with it? And when work's like what, 8 hours a day every day, and then 8 hours sleeping every day, so you've only got a little bit of the day left for the things that you want to do. How did you
Yeah.
manage to keep it alive?
Well, it's almost the reverse of that, right? It's like my passion and enjoyment for nature kept me able to go to work.
Mhm.
Um, so the time that I wasn't there, uh, like the majority of it, I spent engaging with my passion for plants and nature. So to give you an example, even when I lived in the city of San Francisco in an apartment, one of the criteria for choosing the apartment was would it have space that I was be able to keep my collections of plants. And it had like a 35-foot long balcony, and then my bedroom was a floor above with another balcony. So that whole lower balcony I used for a collection of like cloud forest passion flowers. And then they would climb up to my balcony, because San Francisco is just one of the only places in the United States where you can kind of grow these high altitude passion flowers, because they're sensitive both to heat and cold, and it's very stable and pretty humid
Oh, I
all year
know.
round there.
I've
So
tried to grow them.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's like a small example, is that my home, the place where I was going home to, it was a place where I could cultivate that passion. And then when I was out of the house, every week I was taking the train to the San Francisco Botanical Gardens, not just for volunteering, but for my own purposes. I walked through the gardens every week of the year. They have a fantastic collection of deciduous magnolias. So especially, it's a little bit past now, but at the beginning of the year, they're bursting into bloom, and those are a huge like interest of mine as well. So I was always just every week looking at the trees and everything like that. So I was spending my time outside of work, both going to places where I could experience my connection with the natural world, even while I was living in the city. And then I was making my home that I was coming home to a place where I could cultivate that passion as well. And then the last piece was I love I love all kinds of plants. Tropical to temperate, small to the massive magnolias. So in order to kind of maintain my connection with the experience of gardening on a larger scale than is like possible inside an
Mhm.
apartment, uh, every month, at least once or twice, I would go home to the property where I grew up on, and work there. Sometimes I would go for a long weekend, and I would work like 3 17-hour days in the garden because nobody maintains that property except for me, and I wasn't there all the time. So it was just head
Gets
down,
get
like
stuck in.
completely into the work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally
which is
get
like,
stuck in.
people do all kinds of things to do that, to experience that state of flow and just really focus on work. And I'm someone who's very, um, I like to work with my hands. I like to build things and make things and do that kind of
Hmm.
physical work. So I think those three things, going home and working on the big projects, making my own home a place where I could keep plants that I cared about, and then locally going out to explore, really kept me able to work in an office for 15 years, you
I
know.
feel like you and I could like have a talk about just like an hour long talk just about magnolias or just about high altitude passifloras because I've grown, I have a good collection of magnolias here, particularly some
Oh my
big
God.
leaved ones and some section mangalisas. Sorry, anyone that's listening that doesn't know what section mangalisha is. But
But you should. They're lovely.
yeah, because they're amazing and they've been on the planet for like 80 million years. But so I feel like I can't even go down that road with this because otherwise we'll just open up I mean, I collect neotropical blueberries. Um,
Oh,
they grow alongside those high altitude floras. And anyway, we won't go there.
yeah.
Um,
That's,
so I asked you about your coming out, but have you ever had to go through that process of coming out as a nature nerd? That thing where you kind of have to say, actually, I'm not really interested in that. The thing that I'm really interested in is, and people kind of look at you like, what? This is, who am I speaking? This isn't the person that I thought I was speaking to.
yeah. There's one very specific, this was a memorable instance of that, not just for me, but for everybody else. And after that, I'm always very forthright. You can see, like,
Yes.
I wear on my body between my tattoos and my clothing and everything. It's like,
I just want to say
I,
that I did wear my bib overalls in your honor today.
yes, yes, I love it. I love it. Yeah, so I mean, I'm almost my whole life, I've been very forthright about my interest in the natural world, and because I've never felt it's something that, like I said, I grew up in the countryside, and so it was a normal thing to be connected with and interested in the natural world. And so at a very young age, I received the message that, like, that's maybe even something to be proud of. Like, where I was born, everybody, they were ranchers or farmers, deeply connected to the animals they cared for and the crops that they grew in their gardens and everything like that. So it's a very normalized thing when I was quite young. Then when I was in about fourth grade, we moved and changed schools. And, it was a small school. There were 13 people in my grade. And so when I came, I had to make an introduction of myself. And I said, like, hi, I'm John Messel, and I really love birds and flowers. And for the new community that I was in, I don't know if shocked is the correct word, but they were very surprised that, like, a boy would introduce himself that way. But I was very, like, perhaps because of my previous experience, I was just very firm about it and I wasn't embarrassed. And I didn't think that it reflected any, like, deficit or any weakness in me. But it was nevertheless something that the other kids and a lot of the other parents, like, hadn't really heard that much. So it was memorable. It was definitely something that was returned to and that was referenced, like, even years later, people remembering that's how I introduced myself because, um, yeah, we were a small community and there was, like, a normalized set of things that young boys might be interested in that community.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, this is what I'm doing, and I didn't
So
think that there was anything wrong with that.
I used to get picked on in school for being the nature boy. in fact, the nickname was Nature Boy, or I was either queer or Nature Boy. Those were the two nicknames that I got, and I was always kind of like the queer thing. I didn't understand because I hadn't figured that one out yet. Everyone else knew,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
didn't. But the
yeah,
Nature Boy thing, again, I was always like, why is it a bad thing to be Nature Boy? I never
yeah,
got that. I never got that that would be societally abnormal. Um, but
yeah.
it was sufficiently so that it was a thing that people picked on me for. Did you ever experience any that kind of level of negativity around it, or was it was your forthrightness actually enough that bypassed you?
I think like people obviously at first blush, like I said, it was memorable. They considered it to be strange, but again, it was a small community, so there was only 13 people in my whole grade, and I think if anybody ever tried to make it a joke, I think I I didn't like flinch, or I didn't show that, like, how children are. They try to pick at
Yeah,
each other and find something
yeah.
that gets a reaction.
They find the little
And I
yeah.
just, yeah, and I think I was just it was a combination of the fact that it's a small group, right? You could quickly get to know everybody, and so I think there's less bullying, less tension in smaller communities a lot of the times, because you're all there together and everybody knows everybody's parents and everything like that. And um, so that combined with the fact that I was just like, okay, like if you think that's funny, that's fine, but that's what I'm doing, and then everybody just sort of rolled with it. I think another thing that helped is I was always physically larger, on the
Mhm.
larger side, and so I never used that in any kind of forceful way, or to, and I'm a very gentle person,
Yeah,
but it's
that
just not
comes
pushing me
across
around.
in bucket loads that
Yeah,
that you're a
and
gentle
so I
human being.
and so like I wasn't. I think that maybe helps me too. Is like, you make fun of that I'm into flowers and birds, but that's fine. There's no physical consequences for me because you can't push me around, that sort of thing. Um, and that's another thing where just like being in a small community, I think is like, but I know that people do that, or I know that children would do that, and it has always just been so mystifying to me why that should be something that people consider strange or sad, to be connected
Even as an
with
adult,
the world.
actually, even as an adult, I sometimes
Yeah.
kind of go, do I even want to say what I do for a living in this group of people? And there are groups of people that actually, kind of. My father was into like Formula One motor racing and what have you, and some of the
Uh,
blokes that I grew up around, because of my dad, I just wouldn't have even mentioned my personal interest in it. I just kind of nodded and went, "Yeah, I'm interested in cars." But you know, there's certain groups of people that even now I kind of go,
yeah, and that's fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating. It's kind of sad and frustrating because here in the United States, we have the stereotype too that the UK is much more accepting or focused on gardening as a hobby, horticulture in general. Like, I think a lot of it, maybe it comes from the Victorian era plant craze and our perceptions about that. But like in the United States, if you are a young man and you are saying like, "Oh, I'm really into growing orchids, or I'm into gardening," or things like that, it's changed. It's changed a little bit now. But 15 years ago, it was very like,
and the
hmm,
perception is that if you're a young man and you say that you're into gardening, the perception automatically is that you're gay as well.
which is fascinating to me because I grew up in orchid societies and deeply involved in plants, and it's just the same as the rest of the world. Most of
Yes,
the men that are in this world, even though it's like stigmatized, it must be in some ways it must be even harder for them, are straight, you
yes.
know, and they have to deal with this automatic presumption too, which is just like, in my case maybe it turned out to be correct, but
But
it is strange to see that.
you're not the kind of the standard. You're the exception. And that's the thing that's
Yeah,
really interesting about that perception, isn't it? And it is just a
yeah,
perception, which is a bit nuts. And I think it's something that, it's something that I've certainly spotted, experienced, etc. And yeah, I'm also the exception. All of my uncles that were all cut flower growers and horticulturalists and what have you, none of them were gay, but
yeah.
it's seen as being this fair hobby. So that brings me to this next question, which is something that I've asked you before, and that is, how do your colleagues in the adult entertainment industry react to your interest in nature and plants and what have you? And I've seen a few videos recently where you've had other people that you work with, where you've kind of done, and Nick posted a video recently where because Nick's like really into cooking and stuff, and he was with somebody uh like creating it. I can't remember what it was, food anyway, but recently you did some social media stuff about tropical fruits, and
Yeah.
while you were away on a work trip, and you know how do the other guys that you work with in the adult entertainment industry react to this nature boy thing, gardening boy thing?
I mean, I think it's neutral to positive usually. You know, I have to say, like, overall, a lot of people who create this type of content, who are in the adult industry or online content creation, they are, or on average, like, kind of more open, I guess, to people with different interests, different
Mm.
lifestyles, because choosing this path, I mean, it's not easy,
No, I can
in the way
imagine. I
that,
was a model. I know how tough a job that was at times. So I can imagine,
yeah,
I know that you do a tough job, that you're here, there, and
yeah,
everywhere, and that you have to run a schedule and you've got all of that stuff going on. And filming anything is just hard work. It's long, hard work.
yeah. So I think to get back to the question though
Yeah.
about how people react to it, I think it's kind of neutral to positive. I wouldn't say that many people are like they're not really surprised by it. They're not necessarily deeply engaged with it either, but like that's okay. Sometimes people like will comment about how they're like, oh, it's cool that you have this other, this other platform, these other accounts that you've managed to grow in this way, um, because it's a lot of work, to create a following just on one account, and not to mention trying to have parallel, like sort of nature and entertainment things going at once. So yeah, I think it's like it's definitely there's no I've never had any negative feedback about it, which is nice, and which is sort of like that's what you'd expect. If you're in this type of work, you would expect people to be open and accepting to other people's unique personalities,
Just yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the thing that I thought was really nice about that. When I've asked you that question before, the fact that you came back to me with that was actually something that I thought was really nice. In
Yeah,
fact, and we've just touched on it because what you do for a living, film. I've filmed all kinds of things for years and years and years, and days of filming can just be long, sometimes very dull, hard work. And people don't
yeah,
realize that when they get the 15-minute bit at the end, or the 1.5 minute bit at the end, that the content
Yeah.
that's actually getting put out there. They don't realize that this took a whole day, 2 days, whatever, to produce. And
Yeah.
often that can be in environments where you're not necessarily comfortable just being yourself, where you are
Mhm.
having to potentially put on a mask, put on a, whatever it might be. How does nature help you to deal with that? Do you get home and literally just run out into the garden? And
Yeah. Or, regardless of the time of day or night, it's always when I get home, I'm stepping out to just look, to check on this, to check on that, to see where things are. Like it's a yes. I'm a person that can like fall victim to like a lot of stress about everyday things, about things with my work, um, family, life, all this stuff. And I think like my decompression is I just need to go stand outside and look at the garden. Or if I'm somewhere else, I need to go outside, go for a walk, and just stand in a natural place. Um, it's a it's a way that even if I haven't addressed any of the problems that are causing me the stress, I can like decompress enough to develop a strategy. Because I just get easily overwhelmed by things as well, and I get paralyzed and can't make a start on things, and so sometimes I do have to like consciously reset. And going out into the garden is a huge part of that.
would you say that your garden is your place, or do you have a place where you can do that the best? I mean, you have 2 gardens, so is one
Yeah,
of
kind of
them
three.
favored, or
Well, the one that I work on the most, because it's the house that I'm at the most right now, is where I am actually. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or if it's just going to
one
be.
day I'm going to get to the USA and I'm going to actually come and visit.
Yeah, you absolutely should. I'd love to give you a tour. So this is the one where I am now, and it's been a big project. It started from nothing about 3 years ago, and had to do a huge amount of work to turn this into getting to where I want it to be. It's not finished, of course, um, but this is the one because I most often wake up here. It's the one where the first thing I do every day is before I have coffee, before I work out, before anything, is I walk outside. I go outside and I walk around the garden. And I do on my Instagram account. A lot of times I'll record a quick video
Yep,
to bring people
you
along on
do.
that experience. Because as you know, garden changes every day.
Yep.
Every day is different. And so for me, just going out, and while it might look, you know, oh, what's the big deal? It's a garden. It's just plants to someone who has that sort of plant blindness. To me, it's like looking at all the individual things and engaging with how they've changed day to day, what's coming, what's going, what's at its peak, that kind of thing. And like doing that little morning ritual every day is like a huge part of me managing stress and enjoying life too. Cause like you can get into, especially in the United States, there's just enormous pressure to always be working, to always be on, to always be achieving and pushing forward. And we haven't had as much until recently, maybe, of a focus on like thinking about what makes a good life and like actually making that part of the routine too. It's social media can feed into this negatively as well because of the requirement that you constantly be active and
Oh,
posting and creating content. So sometimes my morning walk, I don't record it, but sometimes I do.
yeah. So I do a very similar thing. I come downstairs. I have glass in the door that goes between the house and the greenhouse, and I'll just kind of come downstairs, and the stairs stop at that door, I look into the
Mhm.
greenhouse, I'll open the door, just look in, say, very often I'll say, hello, plants. you know, just hello, plants, and have a little look around and see who's changed and see what's going on. And then on a nice day, I live in North Wales. It rains here a hell of a lot.
Mhm.
And so I can't always just go for a mooch in the garden. But if there is the opportunity to go for a mooch in the garden, then that's kind of, the coffee gets brought with me and normally goes cold while I'm going.
Oh
You
yeah,
know?
you set it down somewhere and then you're off on
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
exactly that. And it sets the day. It really, really does. It's a very important thing for me to do that. So I totally get and I also get, you know, I really have this kind of love-hate relationship with social media. I feel like I need to keep my profile and keep my all of that stuff, and particularly with X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. You know, haven't really decided yet, a really strong following on there, and um and so I feel a lot of pressure to keep that,
Hmm.
because I want to keep that voice.
Hmm.
But at the same time, my partner doesn't have any social media at all. And he's always going, Robbie, you don't have to film everything. you know. But
Yeah.
Nick's quite happy to film, isn't he? He does a lot of the
Yeah.
filming for you? Is he as
Yeah. I mean,
bought into all of this as you are?
he is much more technical in terms of the gear he uses and
Mm,
the editing, everything top to bottom. He is more skilled and more involved in the actual content creation. And if I'm going to be honest, I to me, I'm not low tech, but like I use my iPhone for everything
mm,
that I possibly can. Only recently have I started messing around with microphones or anything like that. And I'm just trying to bring like the beauty of nature and plants and my garden and other places I go, things that I experience, like into the digital world, just with as little friction as I can. Um, but to speak to what you were just saying, I have that tension within me too, like the, oh my gosh, I have to maintain a posting schedule, I have to increase engagement over time, but also like my natural starting point is a bit more like your partner's, where it's like, oh, do we have to record everything? You know,
yeah.
um, it's hard, not just because anytime you're in front of the camera, it is a performance,
Mhm.
which demands a certain focus and everything like that. But also just because my default setting is to want to just absorb something sensually and experientially and not worry about, okay, like, am I presenting this
And that's
in
the
the
thing,
correct
isn't
way?
it? I got one of those ring light things
Mm-hmm.
for my phone recently, so that I could like record things with better lighting, etc. And actually, I kind of just thought to myself, what I really want to do is just sit here and look at this. And actually, then I get on that tangent of, I want to go and pot up that, or I want to go and fiddle with that, or I want to go and look at the newts in the pond, or I want to go and, and not do the whole standing in front of a camera. And actually, I had a
Mm-hmm.
bit of a flurry with TikTok a while back, and I will pick that up again. But then after a while, I was just like, you know, I I'd prefer to not do that for a bit. so,
I feel that.
so,
Uh,
so one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, I mean, you've been really ramping up your kind of nature gardening, um, and YouTube as well, much longer kind of vlogs on YouTube about your experiences of nature, going for walks in the countryside, etc., etc.
Mhm.
Do you see this as a way of shifting away from the adult? And or I mean, so I was very aware when I was modeling that if this had a limited lifespan.
Oh yeah,
There will come a
yeah,
day where I am not pretty enough to do this job, you know?
yeah. I think I have a similar awareness, but I will tell you that that is not actually unique to jobs like this that require a certain physical experience. In my life, I've worked in industries that have had huge transitions. So in the past, I was a farmer and we grew a specific cash crop, and I saw that industry consolidate into corporate farming, and small farmers like us
Yep.
just no longer be able to make it. Um, Nico and I, we worked. We had he had a company where he made hand cast artistic sculptural candles, and we went through the process of seeing, like, I would make all the molds for these and they would be poured individually, and we went through the process of seeing that really unique idea, like beautiful, like think Greek statues but out of wax, then built. So we saw that business basically go have similar molds go into mass production in China for a fraction of the cost and time of what I could do that, make them by hand and just like undercut the price. So farming, like small craftsman manufacturing. And then by next year, the job that I did when I was working for technology companies, it'll be done by AI. There will
Yeah.
not be people doing it. So in my life, I have multiple times seen this sort of transition, this fact that like you're going to have to figure something out. Because if you want to be around here for a long
Having
time, things are changing.
having that thing in the back of your head about what comes next, and it doesn't stop you from not enjoying the thing that you're doing right now, and it doesn't stop you from it doesn't kind of it's not like I am going to switch to that from that to that straight away, but just kind of investigating it, seeing where it goes, etc.,
Yeah,
is really important.
yeah, especially now because like it's been said to death, but like we are in a time of huge transformation, and it's only going to get more intense in the years that come. So you always got to be trying different stuff, and you got to be have a healthy awareness that what you're doing now is probably not forever. But like many of the transitions I've made in my life, it wasn't like I had a 5-year plan where I'm like, okay, next I'm going into this. It was something that sort of just happened or that fell into
Mm.
place. So you got to have a healthy respect for the unpredictability of life as well, and not overvalue your ability to control what happens, or you can get really let down.
I think it's really lovely that actually that you're managing to find a space with your childhood love, your childhood dream,
Mm-hmm.
actually, because that's something that happened for me. I kind of left that whole world behind. I said, no, I've got to get back to this thing that I really want to be doing. And hence I did it. And it was as soon as I did that, as soon as I made that decision and I was able to make that choice in my life, it all started to click. And that's when the right things all started to happen. And I felt like I was like on this wonderful roller coaster to where I am now, and I'm still on that roller coaster because I'm doing what I love, right? And that happens to be nature and gardening. And I think it's really lovely to see that, you know, through the online content creation element of things, you're actually also able to do that. You just went to the which flower show was it?
Oh, the Northwest Flower and Garden Show in Seattle. Yeah,
Yeah, and so
it's
you were
like
actually that took it to a different stage again. It was a different place. You were there on, on site filming, doing the stuff that you do, etc. And it was just another step in that direction. So I thought that was I've followed you on Instagram for a while. If you look at some of your earliest posts or earlier posts on Instagram, I mean, your Instagram is literally a kaleidoscope of water lilies, magnolias, and slipper orchids. And then there's this gentle transition all the way through this process to now, but that's going to keep on happening, isn't it?
Yeah, and I will say that, like, so I've had an Instagram account since 2012 or something, and I, for a long time, did just consider it like a sort of a diary of beautiful things that I would see or that I would encounter, and people could look at it or not. But then at a certain point, I did shift to I had shifted more to that mission that we talked about, of trying to introduce people to something that maybe they could find an interest in, and then they could begin to love and be concerned about and focus on protecting. And what I found is, to start that series of events, I needed to do something more. Most people are attracted by or connected by the presence of another person. Just a flower with no explanation isn't going to trigger that switch in most people's minds. So they need somebody to draw them in and say, hey, I'm here and I want you to look at this.
In your case, a body to draw them in.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, use the tools that you have. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I see what catches people's attention. So what can I use to bring that in, and then where can I take it?
I haven't got quite round to taking my top off yet. Right, perhaps at some point this might happen. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's definitely a catch, John.
Yeah, but even just like the presence of a person who is engaged or who's excited, seeing a face is the first step.
It's interesting in the conservation community that a lot of people, there's a split around that there's those people that are like, no, humans are not important. We have to concentrate on the species. And then there's that kind of camp that is, no, humans are really important. And I'm in that camp. It's the reason why I'm doing this podcast. It's the reason why I have social media and what have you, because actually I'm with you, that if you've got an engaged and engaging human being delivering information, then, and we know it, we've got David Attenborough on this planet still. If you've got that, then you will catch those people and they will take that. They say 10% of any information, people absorb about 10% of any information that's given to them, or they have to have that information given to them in tiny little bite-sized chunks. And so if you've got someone that's engaging like that, then people will absorb it. And if you've got, and that's the trick, it's where we started with this, isn't it? Is the fact that you have this online platform that enables you to engage, and you are then able to give them that snippet of information or get that 10% into them. And there's times when go on.
Go ahead.
There's times when
I hadn't heard that 10%, but it really resonated with me. And on an intuitive level, I basically, the way that I think about any video that I make is like, is there one spark in here that might get someone to look at something they've never bothered to look at before, or to think about something they've never given any thought to? So I like that. Because of course, like, I'm really into this stuff already. I want the books. I want tons of information. I want everything, but that's not where people start.
No, they start with a snippet. They start with just oh, that's interesting, don't they? Mm-hmm. So I've gone completely off on a tangent with some of this, just because it goes that way. But I had some very specific questions that I wanted to ask you. One of those questions is, what is the one ecosystem that you think that every single person should have the opportunity to see in their lives?
Oh,
And I ask that question because you've been to some pretty amazing places. Your trip to see the slipper orchids, was it last year or the year before? Wow.
yeah, last year.
Wowee.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, so before I give a specific answer, I believe that wherever you are in the world, almost anywhere, somewhere nearby, there is something that is very unique and beautiful to your area. And so from a numbers sense, I think the most important ecosystem for someone to see is what's beautiful near them, because it's easiest, and maybe it will be most eye-opening and most likely to give you a connection, to give you something to care about, something that you can then act on because it's where you are in the world. That aside, the type of ecosystem that I have seen that is most personally moving is alpine meadows, for sure, in summer. Because
John, you couldn't have said a nicer thing.
Yeah. It's incredible. So whether it's the slopes of Mount Rainier or in China, below the Himalayas, the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, anywhere where you have this phenomenon where there's heavy, dense snowpack, quick snow melt, and a short season of growth, you get these stunning, very diverse meadows of wildflowers all in bloom at once because they're trying to take advantage of a short season of warmth and growth before it snows again. And that it's a place, but it's like a moment in time as well. So in terms of diversity, that can't compare to like a cloud forest, in the tropics or anything.
Totally.
But everything is in bloom at once in the alpine meadow. It's all happening at one time. So the effect of just standing there and looking around and everywhere, seeing maybe 100 different species of blooming plants at one time is like, it's overwhelming. And it's like it's the on land equivalent to me of a stunning coral reef, which is also something that I think people should see, but that's not necessarily as much for this.
And so I think that there's a metaphor there, isn't there? There's, I love seeing people. I love seeing large groups of people, of all different types of people, all in one place, all at the same time. I think that, I love spending time in a place in London called Finsbury Park because the diversity of humanity that's there is just absolutely incredible, and it's all there in your face, all at once, all at the same time. And I get the same feeling from that as I get from seeing, as you just said, an alpine meadow, or standing in the fynbos in South Africa, which would be my. I'm not going to go there, but that's if I could be dropped anywhere in the world right now, drop me in the fynbos in South Africa because of the diversity, because of the vibrancy and the colour and all of that stuff. And I'm totally with you. Ben and I go to the Alps every summer and just wander around going, oh.
Yeah. Because there's also just like the incredible union of the abiotic forces, the geology and the water, and the structure of the land in union with the biology, just the vibrant colors, the diversity of different plants, and then the temporality of it, the knowing that it's just now. You're just here at this time, and soon it will be, covered in snow again. So I think, there's something magical about that to me.
The next question is a totally flippant one. This podcast is called What's Up Buttercup, and something that children do is they shine buttercups from those alpine meadows underneath their chins to see if you like butter. So my question to you is, do you like butter? And what goes through your head when I ask you that question?
I mean, My first reaction is, in isolation, butter? No. But then if I think more deeply about it, I'm like, well, wait a minute. What do I like about all the treats that I really like? And it's like, as an ingredient, as part of a sum of things, I love butter. But for some reason, I have a knee-jerk anti-butter reaction when I'm thinking just like a stick of butter.
So, as I say, just a totally silly
Yeah,
question. and then there's the kind of, we're coming to the end of our time now, and there's this kind of, the name of the podcast is What's Up Buttercup, and it's quite an old-fashioned term. People don't tend to ask anybody what's up Buttercup anymore. But in the 1950s, actually there was a couple of songs, about Buttercup, and there was actually a song called What's Up Buttercup, and it's Buttercup's a term of endearment. I have seen it used as a negative, but only once. But generally, it's a term of endearment, unlike pansy. And and I love pansies. I am one. But it allows, just that question, it allows you in a very comfortable way to down or offload what's going on in your mind. What's up, Buttercup? So that's the question to you. What's the thing that fills your head, bothers your head, about nature, about LGBT plus community, about the interface between them, or just your day-to-day life, or anything right now? It's an opportunity for you to just kind of go, bleh.
Yeah. Well, in a very literal sense, I explained about how every morning I'm going out into the garden, just first part of the day, to see literally what's up there. And it's funny that you should mention that, because right now we're starting the ranunculus Persian buttercups. Yes. So it's just literal, like on a very literal level. Well, the buttercups are up, and I guess what that evokes or brings into me is some interesting thoughts about my kind of journey in enjoying and experiencing plants. So when I was younger, my fascination with plants was captured very much by wild type organisms. And so I wasn't interested in hybridized garden types of plants. So something, like this, which is far from the wild type that it originated from, it wouldn't have been on my radar, wouldn't have been, something that I would have been excited about. It's too floofy. It's too overdone. It's far from the beauty of nature. But like, as I have gotten older, I've realized that, like, looking carefully at something like that, I find just as much beauty in it, because it represents kind of the union of what's beautiful existing in nature already, and what, like, humans can bring out of that through their involvement or intervention. So this is a flower, but it's something that bears the mark of, like, the love or the attachment or the intention of humans, sometimes for generations of breeding. And so I've been thinking about that lately, because of the shift in how I think about and view hybridized and plants versus wild plants. And when these flowers, the ranunculus, are coming up, I love to see them, and it just reminds me of that. Like, I love this, and it's something that was made in partnership with humans, as much as I love walking in that meadow, where that is not as heavily influenced by people. And that's something that kind of, like, can give me a little bit of hope, because looking forward, it's like, this is the Anthropocene, right? for better or for worse, we are shaping this world as humans. And we can do things that are beautiful and that are a partnership between the living world and ourselves. It doesn't have to, we don't have to everybody be living in a glass box and concrete and nothing. And like, we are losing things, but we can keep some of that beauty that we inherited too. So that's what that whole tangent.
What you just said there is going to be extracted out and turned into a clip that is going to be put on Instagram and shared over and over and over again, because you couldn't have said something that's more true, actually. And I have to thank you for that, John, because I knew.
Oh, thank you.
I knew when I was setting this thing up that you were one of the first people that I wanted to speak to. And actually, you are the first person that I've spoken to as part of this podcast. I knew that this was going to be a beautiful, gentle conversation. Just because of the way that I could see that you are as a human being. But the fact that we've managed to end on something on a thought that is as beautiful as that thought actually has just made this for me. It makes me want to get into all of those other conversations that I'm going to have with all of those other wonderful people that I've got lined up for this podcast. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. And as these things go, it was at the very end of the conversation that the internet decided to cut out. That's one of the problems that I have with living here in the end of a valley in North Wales. I was so pleased to speak to John. His take on nature and plants in particular is so wonderful. And that final thought of his about the connection between humanity and nature and how it can create something that's so very beautiful really will stick with me for a very long time indeed. I can't thank John enough for speaking to me. And as I said in the podcast, I am so looking forward to where this thing that I've started goes. So that's it. The end of the first interview episode of What's Up Buttercup, and looking forward to all of the episodes to come. Thank you for listening.